From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. Well, if you notice the studio looks a little different, that is because we are in our new temporary home. We're actually going to unveil our new studio for our 50th anniversary next year. But for now, here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. Trump's pick for Ag Secretary is now official. What could it mean for Ag?
She made a statement that she's ready to fight and stand up for agriculture in this country.
One senator paints the dire picture for row crop farmers on Capitol Hill. So what can Congress do to help?
We simply have to come up with a package that helps them get through this year.
It's a one-on-one with Ranking Senate Ag Committee member John Boozman. And celebrating 60 years of soy. It's a toast to the past while focusing on the future. Now for the news, farmers have been hit hard by inflation and lower commodity prices, and new numbers from USDA are highlighting that. The agency now forecasting net farm income this year at $140.7 billion. That's a drop of $6 billion from last year and down 22.6% from the peak in 2022. Net cash farm income is pegged at $158.8 billion, down $1.8 billion from last year. Now, despite the downturn, USDA's projections have actually improved slightly since September, and that's because of better livestock receipts. But is the ag economy in a recession? I talk with a panel of experts about it coming up in our marketing roundtables. Well, since the Thanksgiving break, President-elect Trump has announced his nomination for the next Secretary of Agriculture. In making the announcement, Mr. Trump said Brooke Rollins' quote, commitment to support the American farmer, defense of American food self-sufficiency, and the restoration of agriculture-dependent American small town is second to none, end quote. Rollins is president and CEO of the America First Policy Institute, which she founded to promote conservative policies. She previously served as the director of the Domestic Policy Council and the assistant to the president for strategic initiatives during Trump's first term. She grew up on a farm. Now, Rollins' name was not on the original short list of 14 or 15 to be nominated for Ag Secretary that we had. And you'll remember the weekend before Thanksgiving, there were reports the president-elect would nominate businesswoman Kelly Loeffler. But later that weekend, Rollins was then announced as the official choice. This week, Mr. Trump nominated Loeffler to be head of the Small Business Administration. We'll have a reaction to the announcement coming up in our Farm Journal report. Well, there are lots of questions this week for the biofuels industry after the future of the new clean fuel tax credits, known as 45Z, was thrown into controversy. Many wondered whether the Biden administration would provide final guidance on the rule before leaving office in January. However, experts tell us we will see additional updates before Inauguration Day. Tim Urban is a tax policy and legislative legal expert and lobbyist on behalf of the fuels industry. He tells Farm Journal's Clinton Griffiths there will be guidance that comes out in the next couple of weeks.
My expectation and my hope is that we will get guidance before the end of this calendar year that will provide enough information to taxpayers, to producers, the farmers that make the feedstocks, all the people involved in the supply chain, for them to participate in the credit on January 1. Now, I think the follow-up question is that guidance going to be a final tax regulation? The answer is no, right? So this guidance is going to be some sort of a notice that's going to give you just enough to sort of get down the road and start claiming tax credits, with the idea that there's still hundreds of questions left unanswered.
However, Urban says there won't be time to fully finalize the rules before a new administration and Congress takes office. We'll talk about it in our roundtables and coming up in Chip's Corner. Well, with concerns about a recession in the ag economy, more layoffs announced across ag this week. It impacts Tyson Foods, Cargill, and John Deere. Regarding John Deere, a warn notice in Iowa was posted showing the company plans to lay off another 112 workers from its facility in Waterloo. The cuts will take effect in January. The company telling local news media that the latest layoffs are due to challenging market conditions, which continue to result in reduced demand for their equipment. And Tyson Foods is closing 3 plants in total. The first, a plant in Emporia, Kansas, which employs more than 800 people. Tyson Foods releasing a statement to Farm Journal saying it made the difficult decision to close the plant in order to increase the efficiency of its operations. It says taking care of its impacted team members is its top priority. It's also closing 2 plants in the northern part of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That will impact 229 workers. Reuters reports Tyson projects the business will suffer an operation loss in fiscal year 2025. That's it for the news. Well, winter arriving with a punch for many this week. We'll have a check of weather coming up next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Pioneer. Plant Pioneer brand corn for a home field advantage and yields that beat the competition. With advanced genetics and traits to combat your toughest challenges, the Pioneer lineup of corn hybrids is your secret to a winning season. Your best year starts here. U.S. Farm Report weather is brought to you by H&S Manufacturing. With models ranging from 1,200 to 4,200 gallon capacity and right side discharge, the Top Shot manure spreaders spread like no other. Learn more at the H&S website.
Well, as I mentioned before the break, winter arriving with a punch. Historic snowfall blanketing northern Michigan and the Northeast, but a round of warmer weather is on the way for some. Meteorologist Jack Van Meter joining us now with weather. Jack?
Taking a look at our jet stream, especially to start off and end the weekend and into next week. What we're watching is a bit of a teeter-totter system in the jet stream. Ridge, trough, pretty much going back and forth. So as I play this in motion, again, watch this. We are watching that trough start to develop again off the northern plain states, already extending pretty close to the four corner states as well, bringing some colder air and more polar air, especially again to parts of the northern states there. But take a look at this. That cold air really starts to rush south right around the Midwest and Heartland areas and really starts to deepen actually a lot and strengthen by midweek, and by the end of the week actually starts to regress and go back north and to the east. That being said, what's forming out to our west? Well, of course, another high pressure ridge. As we can see, those really warm and above average temperatures are going to be spanning from pretty much all the way down in San Antonio, all the way pretty close to Billings, Montana there, so keep that in mind. And that's pretty much going to be the pattern for the first little bit there of December, especially the middle part there. Here's our snowfall estimate going throughout the weekend and into the week ahead. And as we can see, we are looking at one of those clipper systems to move through the Midwest states and also just clip parts of the Great Lakes states as well and into the East Coast. They're really starting to dump some pretty impressive snow totals. Could be looking at a wide swath of 6 to maybe even a foot of snow, depending on where some of those lake effect bands move on. And then we're looking at another system out west that's really going to be delivering a good bit of snow, especially to the mountain region, starting from the northern Rockies all the way down into Denver there, where they also could be seeing anywhere from 6 to maybe even a foot. Of course, it's all going to be depending on elevation out there. Here's our precipitation outlook for pretty much the middle of the month, December 10th all the way to the 14th. And we're looking at is a pretty dry four corners region going into the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma, stretching out there just from some persistent high pressure. That being said, Pacific Northwest could be wetter than normal just because of all of the low pressure systems that are going to be forming off the coast and bringing that abundant moisture on shore. And here's our temperature outlook, and actually nothing wild here. A lot of the states really going to be at those normal temperatures, but which is exactly what we want to see, as we can see a little bit above average, especially for the northern Great Plains.
Thanks, Jack. Well, is ag in a recession? And with the focus on trade, which commodity could be impacted most if the U.S. does enter into another trade war? Terrain Ag's John Newton and NCGA lead economist Krista Swanson join us next to talk markets. Welcome back. Well, John Newton and Krista Swanson joining us this week. I want to kick things off with the latest results from the latest Ag Economist's monthly monitor. Okay, 81% of economists think we are on the brink of a recession. 56% say we're actually in a recession. John, I know the story differs if you're talking about row crops or if you're talking about livestock, but with more layoffs announced by major ag companies this week, do you think we're in a recession?
Well, I certainly think we're close. If we're not in it, we're very close to it. Where crop cash receipts have been the last few years. I mean, it's hard to break even. Prices are continuing to decline. Next year, prices aren't projected to be any better. I think a lot of crops are looking at 3 consecutive years of low or tight margins, and if that were to continue, you're looking at farm income numbers that go back to 2016-17 levels. At that point in time, we had a surge in farm bankruptcy. So we're not moving in the right direction, Tyne, that's for sure.
Well, and Krista, when you look at also the results, 94% of economists we surveyed think the current situation will force more consolidation within the row crop industry. And when you look at the outlook for major U.S. crops, I know you have a chart that kind of paints this picture, but it's a poor profitability picture, not just this year, but also 2025, including for corn.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at that outlook for 2025, it's just another step downward. The chart makes that really clear. As John already pointed out, this is the third year for a lot of crops. And again, it's not, I'm watching corn closely, but not just corn. It's really across virtually all of the crop sector. So when we think about, what that means for farmers and looking ahead to consolidation, in this high cost, low price environment, that is just tough to operate in. It's hard to weather, and those lower cost producers are going to be the ones that can weather this easier. And just the farmers that stay in business are going to be needing more acres to spread their fixed costs across.
Yeah, and John, I know Terrain did some analysis from USDA's
Mhm.
latest data revealing that crop margins are likely to remain tight or even below break even in 2025. Walk us through that, John.
Well, USDA released updated projections for the cost of production going into 2025, and it's no secret that input costs are going to remain elevated next year. They're up 30% since the last time we did the last farm bill. And where are crop prices going? Every farmer in America knows that crop prices are going down. USDA projects a corn price of 3.90, a soybean price of 10, a cotton price of 66 cents a pound. It's you can't pencil that out when you're talking about input costs that are so high and prices that are so low. So again, like Krista said, across the board, every major field crop is looking at 3 consecutive years of margins that are at or below break even. And that's tough in farm country.
At or below break even, economics aren't pretty. But right now, Krista, do you think economics favor more corn acres next year or soybeans?
Yeah, so actually, I just was doing a presentation a couple days ago and had a chart looking at that corn to soybean price ratio, which depending on if you want to use the nearby futures or the November and December corn and soybean prices for next year. Either way, it tends to be favoring corn if you look at that price ratio. But we also have the cost side. That's a really big deal for farmers. And while the price ratio is favoring corn right now, as we look ahead to next year, it costs a lot more to put in an acre of corn. So that could be deter someone from moving a swing acre. And we just have a lot of acres that stay on a rotation no matter what because it makes agronomic sense.
Mhm.
There's some other reasons besides those, but certainly there's going to be some of those swing acres across the country. And so as we look ahead to next year, we might see USDA is currently projecting 92 million corn acres. I think it's likely that we could see that inch up a little bit from there, which is great to have more corn from my perspective, but at the same time means that we have more supply coming in on the balance sheet and need to have a place to go with that.
Yeah, and we're going to be hearing from farmers in like North Dakota looking at other crops like sunflower. So when you look at some of those specialty crops too, well, we haven't even gotten into the talk about trade and tariffs and the impact that could have on prices. We'll take a quick break and then we're going to ask John and Krista about that next. John Newton and Krista Swanson rejoining us. All right, what's difficult to project is how possible tariffs and trade could impact prices in the months ahead. Last time it was really soybeans that saw the biggest impact when we were in a trade war. John, as you look ahead though, more economists in the Ag Economist Monthly Monitor say this time around corn could be at bigger risk. What do you think?
Well, I think you have to wait and see what actually happens. There's been a lot of talk, but nothing's actually happened just yet. And if something happens, then obviously you're going to evaluate what the potential impacts would be. I mean, for corn, Mexico's our top market. So if there were something to happen with Mexico, then certainly that's a concern. China's not buying a whole lot of corn right now. So I think that's why the economists and the monitor really looked at corn, looked at Mexico, and came to that conclusion.
Yeah, and that is key because the monthly monitor did show it's not just China that we're at risk and losing some market share there, but Mexico as well. And Krista, when you look at how corn could be at risk if we do enter this higher tariff environment. I know you and American Soybean Association as well did some analysis on what it would cost.
Yeah, and to John's point, I mean, what our analysis looked at with American Soybean Association was specifically China and what would be the situation if China came back at U.S. corn and soybeans with retaliatory tariffs. And in that type of situation, we were looking at if a 60% tariff on U.S. corn and soybeans translated to a 13-cent per bushel drop in corn price in this projection modeling that we did. But that doesn't account for Mexico. If we have a situation with Mexico, that's a whole different ballgame because over 40% of our corn exports have gone to Mexico this year. Just a really critical trading partner for corn, but also a lot's left to be seen. A couple things here. We're talking about a possible tariff situation, but also at the end of the previous trade war with tariffs, we ended up with a trade deal with purchase commitments for U.S. corn. And so, I think that a lot's left to be seen on what type of
Mhm.
impact this is going to have.
Yeah, and if we can see a
Can I
phase
can I
two.
can
Yeah,
I hit on that? I mean, because that's an excellent
absolutely.
point. Everyone wants to talk about the negatives associated with tariffs. They forget that for 3 straight years, China bought more than $30 billion worth of U.S. Agricultural products. You take those purchases, combine it with the prevent plant year that we had in 2019. That's one of the reasons why we saw net farm income reach historic highs in 2022. So there are two sides to this coin that folks need to consider.
Yeah, and we explored that a couple of weeks ago. Well, when we asked economists what will impact crop prices over the next 6 months, of course, South America is still a big factor. Last month, it was all about South America, but this month, more economists are talking trade. But John, you look at soybean crush here domestically, it smashed an all-time record in October. So how much could domestic demand come into play here with prices?
I certainly think, if there are headwinds on the trade front, you definitely look at strength in the domestic market. I think we've seen soy oil, exports have gone through the roof. There's just so many opportunities in the domestic market. I think you need to see some clarity over what, the 40B or 45Z. We saw a flip flop this week there on what we may potentially see next Congress, next administration. Do they put more clarity on those rules? And I think overall in ag right now, no matter what sector you're in, if you're in the dairy sector, the cattle sector, hogs, you name it, the name of the game is uncertainty. Planning ahead and risk management is going to be really key.
Krista, John, I really appreciate you joining us this weekend. We need to take a quick break and then we'll have much more actually from Machinery Pete next.
Hey, welcome back to Tractor Tales, folks. This week we have an impressive international lowboy cub from a collection in southwestern Michigan.
This is a 1955 international lowboy. I got this from Bill Benner here. It was his dad's. I started working on it when I was 16 years old and continued to work on it until I got it. I've been told don't paint it. It's good the way it is. It's got its original paint and everything, but I'm undecided at this point.
It was in a garage at my dad's house for decades, and from time to time Scott would come over and work on it. My dad died in 2012, and I have a sister, Jenny, who lives up in Minnesota. And she kind of was interested in getting the tractor up there so she could use it on their property. She had Scott do some rehab work on it, and then a few years later, as we were really trying to figure out the logistics of getting it up there and having it serviced if it needed service, it just became more and more unlikely that made sense. So she said, why don't we just give that tractor to Scott? So we did. It probably would have just been a kind of a relic up there and sat idly, and to think that it's still chugging away is kind of a good feeling. Actually, I used it to plow under what was left of his garden in the backyard after I pulled out some compost area and stuff. And I've got a picture of me using this probably 6 or 7 years ago. My grandson's standing on the foot deck there we're giving a wave to the camera.
I use it a little bit. I push up some brush with it now and then, and some leaves, and I use it, and I'll keep it around in my family for sure.
Thanks, Greg. Well, as we told you in news, Brooke Rollins is Trump's pick for Secretary of Ag. But what impact could that have on agriculture? Plus, a one-on-one with one of the leading senators pushing for financial relief for farmers. That's all to come when U.S. Farm Report continues.
You're watching U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition.
Welcome back. Well, reaction is coming in after President-elect Trump announced his nominee to be the next Secretary of Agriculture. We told you in our last half hour that Brooke Rollins of Texas has been nominated to serve as the 33rd Secretary of Agriculture. And as Farm Journal's Michelle Rook explores this weekend, the announcement comes after several people were named as possibilities, and even after reports another person had been selected.
Tyne, after the roller coaster ride regarding Trump's Secretary of Ag pick, we know that Brooke Rollins is steeped in policy and in fact served as a policy advisor in the first Trump administration. She was most recently CEO of the think tank America First Policy Institute, which aligns with the president-elect's agenda on many agricultural issues. And she was on the short list for the White House Chief of Staff, which may be her biggest asset for agriculture. The resume of the U.S. Secretary of Ag nominee is impressive. Brooke Rollins is a Texas farm girl who earned degrees including ag development at Texas universities. She ran a state-level think tank before working in the first Trump administration as director of the Domestic Policy Council, and most recently headed a think tank that aligns with Trump's agenda. But it's her relationship with Trump that makes her so valuable.
I think she's going to be similar to the way Dick Ling was as USDA Secretary under President Reagan. He knew Dutch Reagan, as he called Reagan, on a personal basis. Brooke Rollins knows Donald Trump on a personal basis. So not that she'll have to, but she can get on the phone and call him directly.
In the past, Rollins has supported ag research and banning foreign ag land ownership, and she says she'll fight to protect U.S. ag interests.
The most important thing is that agriculture has a voice in the Oval Office that advocates for them and talks about why policies, things that the administration may do, how it impacts agriculture. Having a champion in the room is the most important thing.
And who she picks for her staff will be an important clue about how she'll run USDA.
Having a deputy that's strong in production ag, undersecretaries that are strong in production ag, those are all going to be very, very important for agriculture over the next 4 years.
Wiesmeyer says Trump's push for government efficiency will also include USDA.
This is going to be some initiatives that she'll have to implement, and that includes worker requirements for the food stamp program. Watch for that.
And Rollins is expected to support and execute Trump's trade and tariff policy.
He wants allies. He wants his plan to be executed, and she'll work closely with the Treasury Department Secretary Scott Bessent. She'll work closely with the National Economic Council Director, and she'll work closely with Commerce Secretary. So yes, absolutely, that she'll be in lockstep on his trade policy.
That is a bit of a concern for the American Farm Bureau.
We will make the case that we think there are better ways to begin negotiations, obviously with the tariff hammer in your back pocket.
But Rollins is a consensus builder, and so Vanderwall's hopeful they can work with her on trade and other policy, and are encouraged with her record of protecting farmers.
She made a statement that she's ready to fight and stand up for agriculture in this country, especially with the economic situation we have. So we're encouraged by that, and we think we'll be able to have a good working relationship.
The American Soybean Association and National Cattlemen's Beef Association congratulated Rollins on the nomination, saying her policy experience will be valuable, as well as her record of rolling back regulations. I'm Michelle Rook for U.S. Farm Report.
Thanks, Michelle. Well, Rollins was actually on Capitol Hill this week meeting with key legislators. One of those was Republican Senator John Boozman, as you see here. He's the current ranking member of the Senate Ag Committee and will transition to chairman in January. So what did their meeting entail? We have a one-on-one with the senator next.
Sustainable Farming Week is brought to you by Neogen. Prioritizing herd health and embracing genomic testing are key steps toward maximizing your operation's success. Stay ahead of the curve, invest in your herd's health, and uncover their full potential.
Well, joining us now is Senator John Boozman, ranking member of the Senate Ag Committee and come January, chair of the Senate Ag Committee. Senator, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to join us this weekend.
No, thank you as always for having me.
Well, I understand that you met this week with the nominee to serve as USDA Secretary, Brooke Rollins. Let's start off with some insight there. What did you learn from that meeting?
Well, I was very pleased. She's very close to the president, which is so important in these cabinet positions, that she's got his ear. And so because of that and because of some of her views and things, I felt very, very comfortable with her. I'm looking forward to getting her confirmed as quickly as possible and looking forward to working with her in the future.
Any indication of what her priorities are going to be come day one?
No, not so much. We talked a lot about just the condition of agriculture right now, the fact that if you're growing something, you're probably losing money. The economists tell us that things as far as commodity prices, input cost, are probably not going to get any better.
Well, we're going to get into the ag economy here in just a minute, but you also met with Lee Zeldin, the nominee to lead the EPA. We're hearing some concerns among farmers about his track record when it comes to biofuels. But what were some of your biggest takeaways from that meeting? Do you think he will be a friend to agriculture?
I think he will be a friend of agriculture. One of the great problems that we've got is permitting in agriculture. Adhering to what the Supreme Court said regarding waters of the U.S., all of those kind of things. What farmers need is certainty with the law, and so I think he's gonna be a breath of fresh air.
You've been vocal lately about the pain across farm country, specifically among row crop farmers. During your remarks on the Senate floor this week, you painted the dire picture and said, quote, "We need to provide producers with the certainty and predictability to be able to go to the bank and have confidence that help is on the way so they can continue farming." You're pushing for emergency relief. Will that be enough, Senator?
Hopefully so. I mean, we're in a situation that the only thing I would wonder about your survey is who doesn't think that we're in a recession. We simply have to come up with a package that helps them get through this year. The last 2 years, as I mentioned earlier, are the worst ever as far as decrease in ag income. And then going forward, if we don't get the modernized, if we don't get the risk management tools adjusted for inflation, then the bankers aren't going to have the certainty that they're going to, their risk is going to be less, and it's going to be difficult for a lot of farmers to get the financing that they need. So it's not only the economists that are telling us, it's not only the farmers that are telling us, but it's all of the lenders. Everyone that's involved in agriculture lending is painting a very dire picture.
At this point, do you think the Farm Act will get passed? And if so, how will it be passed? I mean, will it be attached to the continuing resolution, or what's the plan?
Well, we're working literally as we speak to get the language together, to get agreement from both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, to move forward. So I can't tell you, for sure that it's going to get passed. I know if you've read anything that I've said for the last year and a half, you know where I'm at on this, and I understand how important it is. As far as where it would be attached, it would probably be attached to the continuing resolution.
Well, Farm Bill, you also mentioned that, a Farm Bill extension. I mean, that sounds likely at this point. Should we just bank on an extension, and is an extension enough considering the dire picture in farm country that you continue to talk about?
Well, I think that we have to have an extension because it runs out, at the end of December. So we need an extension. The extension will be for a year, but that doesn't mean, and this is really important, that doesn't mean that we have to go for a year.
Well, with the new Farm Bill, then next year, do you start from scratch, Senator, or do you use the existing framework already set by the House?
And this is really important. We've had many hearings, many listening sessions throughout the country. We're continuing to do that right now. So it's not like all of that work goes away. So we've got some ideas. I have a framework, GT has a framework, Congressman Scott has ideas, Senator Klobuchar will have some ideas. So we'll have new ideas, We need to get those gelled together. But the underpinning, all of the work that we've done, the conditions in ag country, all of that is there. So no, it's not like starting over at all.
Senator, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us this weekend. We need to take a quick break, and then we'll have much more right here on U.S. Farm Report. Now for a glimpse of ag around the world, a big announcement this week from Cargill, the company announcing it plans to lay off 5% of its employees worldwide. That translates to about 8,000 jobs. The Minnesota-based company has more than 160,000 employees around the world. The cuts include 475 employees from its facilities in Minnesota. The company says the changes are part of a long-term strategy it set earlier this year. But Farm Journal Washington analyst Jim Wiesmeyer says the company's profits fell $2.5 billion in the fiscal year ending in May, the lowest since 2015. It also faced challenges due to falling commodity prices, including major grains dipping to near four-year lows, leading to shrinking crop processing margins. The U.S. cattle herd is also at its smallest in 7 decades, impacting Cargill's beef processing operations. USDA is taking additional steps to protect the U.S. herd following a positive detection of New World screwworm in a cow in the southern Mexico state. The discovery prompted USDA to increase import restrictions on Mexican cattle and product imports. However, without any detectable spread, the market is gearing up for a reopening of the border sooner rather than later. Animal health experts say the current precautions are warranted as it's a significant threat to U.S. animal health.
And so it can have a huge impact. So certainly an economic impact because it decreases the health and wellness of our livestock. Certainly thinking about loss of animal use. And certainly thinking about our wildlife populations that could be decimated by this disease.
She advises producers to monitor herds, especially in southern cattle production areas, and use preventative measures, including sterile fly introduction or animal health products. Market watchers tell us they expect the border to reopen for Mexico cattle after Christmas. That's a glimpse of ag around the world. Well, it was a bit of a whiplash when it comes to the long-awaited guidance surrounding the biofuels tax credit and 45Z. We'll explain why in Chip's Corner coming up next. Time now for Chip's Corner with AgriTalk. Chip Flory joining us this weekend. Chip, we talked about it in news. We talked about it in the roundtables. A bit of whiplash when it comes this week with the biofuels tax credit, guidance surrounding that, what impact it could have on 45Z. We had one report saying, listen, the Biden administration isn't going to release that guidance. Another report just a couple hours later saying, no, they are going to release that guidance. Where are we?
Where we are is in a massive confusion right now over 45Z. The confusion came in, as you said, Reuters hit us with the no guidance coming from the Treasury Department or the Biden administration. And then a Treasury Department spokesman came out and said, no, there will be some guidance. Now, what is happening here is the Treasury Department knows that it's got a job to do when it comes to this tax credit and 45Z because it is part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, I talked with Corey Levinsky from S&P Global last week on AgriTalk, and guys, it like it or not, it's coming.
The 45Z is part of the law. So, I mean, the IRA was passed into law 2 years ago. 45Z is a important provision of it. It just had a delayed effective date. So the 45Z is going to become effective January 1st. The problem is this guidance that everybody's waiting for from the Department of Treasury is basically what's going to be setting the rules in terms of how it's going to be administered, what feedstocks are going to be eligible, and the method for calculating emissions reductions, which is a key variable in calculating the amount of the credit.
Okay, so Tyne, there's lots of variables here, but I'm going to bottom line it for you here real quickly. Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act, 45Z tax credits supporting or incentivizing production of sustainable aviation fuel from the biofuels base, the feedstock that we've got available right now, was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Therefore, we can't just ignore 45Z. It is law on January 1, 2025. The question then becomes, Tyne, Where is it on the priority list of the Trump administration? But I will tell you this, there are some Republican lawmakers out there, some influential Republican lawmakers out there that are now saying there are bits and pieces of the Inflation Reduction Act that are worth keeping, and 45Z and what it does for sustainable aviation fuels and therefore for the biofuels industry is part of what they say is worth keeping.
All right, Chip Flory, you can catch him twice a day, 10 a.m. as well as 2 p.m. for AgriTalk. When we come back, 60 years of soybeans. We talk about the impact and from the farm next.
Sustainable Farming Week is sponsored by John Deere. Your land, your brand. Technology, equipment, and support to help you farm better now and generations from now.
U.S. Farm Report's coverage of the ISA Impact Awards is brought to you by the Illinois Soybean Association. For 60 years, the Illinois Soybean Association has looked beyond the rows to help Illinois farmers grow more opportunities from every acre. Watch our story at illsoy.org/60 seasons.
A lot happened 60 years ago. The Ford Mustang was officially unveiled by Henry Ford II at the World's Fair. The Kellogg's Company began selling the Pop-Tart. And U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law the historic Civil Rights Act. But for Illinois agriculture, it marked the beginning of the Illinois Soybean Association and Illinois Soybean Checkoff. And this weekend, we reflect on the impact that's had.
Elliot Uphoff is living his dream.
I would be the 5th generation, and we're coming up on our 100th year on our home farm.
Raising the 6th generation now on this family farm, he's been back farming full-time for just over a decade.
Harvest was a breeze this year, honestly. We started and then we never stopped, and we did it in 4 weeks, which has never happened.
Illinois Soybean Association celebrated 60 years of success with their annual Impact Awards this week. Ron Kindred is the current chairman of the Illinois Soybean Association, and he says when you look back, it's truly amazing to see how far soybean production has come.
60 years ago, the United States grew 30.8 million acres of soybeans with a total production of 739 million bushels with an average yield of 24 bushels per acre. This year alone, Illinois grew over 11 million acres of soybeans, and we produced 700 million bushels ourselves in this state.
Illinois is a powerhouse when it comes to soybeans. The state ranks first in soybean yield, soybean production, and soybean exports. And as a member of the Illinois Soybean Association board, Uphoff says they aim to grow that even more.
We are very fortunate in this state that we have many things that make us inherently profitable. We have great infrastructure. We have 2 rivers that we can deliver to.
This week, as the Illinois Soybean Association celebrated 60 years, it was a night of toasting to the success of past and current achievements. That included recognizing the Illinois Soybean Association's Farm Family of the Year, the Moore family of Roseville. Ron Moore has held numerous influential positions in the soybean industry, including past president of the American Soybean Association. And when he looks back at how far the soybean industry has come, he says the headway with trade is what stands out to him.
We've come a tremendous amount. Back when I first started on Illinois soybean, we didn't really trade much with China. It's just amazing what we have done as a soybean industry, especially in Illinois, trying to move, as people have said, move that pile of soybeans into the marketplace, whether it's domestically or into the international market.
Ron's wife, Deb, has been on the farm since they got married 44 years ago.
When we first started farming, we were charting things to look at prices, and there was a definite curve, and you could follow it and knew when the highs and lows were going to be. When it became a more global market, those charts just kind of went by the wayside, and it's really changed.
Looking ahead, where does Ron see the most growth? He says you have to look beyond China.
Mexico and Canada, they've become our number one or number two trading partner, and I think it's imperative that we continue to have good relations with our neighbors to the north and south.
John Lump is the CEO of Illinois Soybean Association, and he says the past 6 decades have produced major change, but he's excited for what's ahead.
The past is a reflection of not only success, but failures too. But you learn from both success and failure and how to plan for the future. And so I like to learn a little bit. I don't want to dwell on the past. I want to plan on what we can do for farmers in the future.
Focusing on the future, Lump says one thing that's going to change the game for farmers is the role of transportation in Illinois.
China's number one customer today. It won't be in a few years. We are looking at other countries to become our trading partners.
As farmers continue to break barriers on yields, the top priority is to be able to transport that crop to where it needs to go.
We need to make sure that, is the Mississippi going to be viable in 10, 15 years? How do we secure that? Do we need new rail, transports? What is the future? How do we get it more out to the East Coast? Because of our location, we need to make sure that we can get the crop out of the field to market.
It's change makers of the past, present, and future that will now forge a new path, and one these Illinois farmers are excited about.
Well, I had the pleasure of emceeing the Impact Awards Tuesday night. It truly was a great night honoring the change makers in the industry. Well, next week we're on the road. We will be broadcasting from Farm Journal's Milk Business Conference in Las Vegas. We hope you'll join us as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.